Morning of good young grasshoppers. This is Corinne with another video, and today I wanted to talk about waiting on the Lord. So, especially with this younger generation, we live for instant gratification. We are used to getting what we want as soon as we ask for it. We have fast food restaurants, all these different things. It's very easy because we have a lot of the things that we want at the tip of our fingers. So a lot of times we apply that to other areas in life as well. And we're like, well, since I want this, I feel like I should have it. Like I shouldn't have to wait for it. And some people don't feel that way, but a lot of us even unconsciously do at some point or another. So I wanted to give this analogy first. Picture this. Okay, so we're in a restaurant. We're seated, our waiter or waitress comes, asks us how we're doing and greets us. They offer us drinks. We order our drinks. They bring us our drinks back. And they ask if we're ready to order. If we're ready to order, then we go ahead and go. If you're like me, then you probably need like an extra 10, 15 minutes to order. So then they come back and then you order. And then they end up bringing your food, right? And then after they bring your food, they're like, hey, is there anything else you need? How is everything going? And they stop by periodically to refill your drinks and all that stuff. And then eventually they bring you the check, right? And from observation, there's two types of tippers. There's the ones that decide whether to or not to tip based on the quality of the service, or how much to tip based on the quality of the service. Now, picture it this way. Picture yourself as the waiter or the waitress. Picture the person you're waiting on as God. And picture the order as God giving you tasks and putting steps before you that you need to do in order to receive your tip, which is the blessing. Okay, so with that idea in mind, I want to read the scripture, okay? So in Deuteronomy chapter 31, verses 5 through 8, I'm going to read it. This is the English Standard Translation. So it says, and the Lord will give them over to you, and you shall do to them according to the whole commandment that I have commanded you. Be strong and courageous. Do not fear or be in dread of them, for it is the Lord your God who goes before you. He will not leave you or forsake you. Then Moses summoned Joshua and said to him in the sight of all of Israel, be strong and courageous, for you shall go with this people into the land the Lord has sworn to their fathers to give them. And you shall put them in possession of it. It is the Lord who goes before you. He will be with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. Do not fear or be dismayed. Now, at this point, this is basically Moses like retiring. He's like, listen, I'm too old for this. Okay, so since I'm too old for this and I'm not going to cross the Jordan with you, I'm going to put Joshua in charge and you guys are going to follow him now. Okay, so into the land that God has promised them. Okay, so what really happened was God told Moses to take his rod and speak to the rock and tell it to bring forth water for the people. And instead of listening to God, Moses took his rod and struck the rock to bring forth water. And God said, well, since you're showing the people that you don't trust me and you're supposed to be leading the people to trust me, you are not going to be able to lead them into the promised land. So, connecting this with the analogy, I wanted to mention a couple of things. There are 3 reasons or 3 ways that God has you in the waiting for the blessing that he has promised you. And that is, he is trying to protect you, or he is trying to position you, or he is trying to prepare you. Okay? One of the things that stuck out to me a lot, which is why I really wanted to use this verse, is if you look back in verse 6, it says, be strong and courageous. Do not fear or be in dread of them, for it is the Lord who goes with you. And then it goes in verse 8, it says, it is the Lord who goes before you. Okay, so when I think of someone going before me, I think of, actually an analogy that I had when I was driving home. So I was driving home and I took a different route this time, and y'all, I hit traffic. Okay, listen. So let me just, first of all, I live in Florida. Okay, that Florida heat is, I live in Florida. Okay, if you think that that's not that bad, right? Okay, so I don't have working AC. Okay, no AC plus Florida heat and being on the road for hours, they don't mix, okay? And you get hot and frustrated, and your clothes are sticking to you, and you try to roll the windows down and go as fast as you can, but then you can't go fast because you're stuck in traffic, so then you're stuck in the heat with no wind. It can get frustrating, okay? So I was getting a little frustrated. And I was just like, God, listen, I'm just trying to get home. Like, can we speed this process up a little bit? I'm kind of hot. You know what I'm saying? And then I realized after, I don't know, maybe like 30 minutes, that the reason there was so much traffic was that there was a horrible accident. Like, horrible, horrible, horrible. And so then I really sat there and I was just like, God, thank you. Because a lot of times we try to rush God and we don't realize that the main reason God has us waiting is to protect us. If I would have rushed God or rushed anything in that process, it could have been me in that accident. So then I realized that one of the reasons God really does have us back, hold us back, is not to literally hold us back, but to go before us and prepare our blessing before he brings us to it, or he brings our blessing to us, right? So that's the first way of God actually protecting us in the midst of our waiting, okay? So the next thing is God could be positioning us. And what I mean by that is when you're following coordinates, when you're trying to get somewhere and you're looking at the gypsy, right? That's what we call a GPS, When you're looking at the gypsy, there are certain directions you have to follow in order to get to your destination, right? Okay, so in verse 5, it says, and the Lord will give them over to you, and you shall do to them according to the whole commandment that I have commanded you. There are certain steps that God will give you in order to help you get closer to your blessing. And a lot of times, we don't see it that way, because a lot of times we see it as, okay, I prayed this prayer. Okay, so I'm just going to sit here and wait for change to come. In certain cases, you're going to be sitting for a hot minute, okay? There are certain things that God will have you do in order to put you in a position to receive the blessing you're asking for. For example, I had a really toxic friendship, but because I didn't want to let go of this friendship, I was praying for God to strengthen my relationship with him, my vertical relationship with God, and strengthen my focus on God and my trust in God. But I was so focused on this friendship and not losing this friendship that I couldn't receive that blessing that I was asking God for, that blessing of closeness and spiritual intimacy, right? So God put a task in front of me that I was honestly terrified of. He wanted me to actually walk away from this friendship. In other words, in order for me to receive that spiritual intimacy that I was asking God for, God put a task in front of me to walk away from the distractions that I was holding on to, because I was making that friendship and the person in that friendship a little God, and I was, in a sense, focusing more on him than I was on the voice of God. So God wanted to put me in a position to become closer to him, but in order to get to that position, I had to walk away from the friendship. What is God trying to tell you to do or to tell you to let go of, or to tell you to step into, in order for you to receive the blessing that God is, that you're asking God for. So we talked about protecting you. We talked about positioning you. Now we're going to talk about preparing you. The last sentence in chapter 6 says, he will not leave you or forsake you. Okay? It also says it again in verse 8. It says, he will be with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. Do not fear or be dismayed. Could it be that part of the reason God has you waiting in this process is because he is trying to prepare you for the blessing? He is trying to grow your trust in him in order for you to actually receive this blessing. And when I say preparing you, it doesn't necessarily have to just be talking about growing your trust in him, but growing you spiritually, mentally, and emotionally in general. Preparing you to becoming the woman of God and the man of God he wants you to be in order to receive that blessing and use that blessing to bring him glory. One of the biggest examples that I can think of, let's talk about relationships, okay? It's really easy for us to be like, dang, I can't stand being single. Like, I'm ready for God to send me my man and blah, 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 blah. You're ready for God to send you your man, but are you ready for your man? Are you in a position to, are you the woman of God that your man, that man of God needs? Are you the man of God that woman of God needs? Okay, what areas do you need to work on in order to be prepared to fully receive that blessing in that godly relationship? You know, I'm learning more and more now in this season of singleness, and I actually read it in this book called Pray While You Pray. I'll show that book at the end. I love that book. You guys have to read it. There's a devotional with it too. Shout out to TT because she was dropping some knowledge, okay? Is that we rush the season of singleness, but if we actually think about the season of singleness, from God's perspective, what if God is trying to do something in that season of singleness that he can't do in a season when we're in a relationship? What if we need to be single in order for God to fulfill a certain purpose in us, and us rushing through that season, and it is us robbing ourselves of certain blessings and also robbing God of the glory that he deserves in this season? So you really want to think about, when you're trying to rush God, listen, think about these three things. What is God protecting you from? What is God, where is God maybe positioning you? And how is God preparing you for the blessing that you're trying to receive? So one amazing example of where God has you in a season of waiting, seemingly for too long, is the season of waiting that I was in with my brothers. So most of you guys know that I have two older brothers that I grew up with, and we never had the best relationship. Never. Like, to the point where even if someone asked me about my brothers, I would talk about my brothers from a place of hurt and project those negative feelings onto that person who didn't even know them. So then they would think that my brothers were horrible people, which they're not. that was just how far into those grudges and how far into that hurt and pain that I was in. I was so brainwashed into thinking that it was them and that they were the problems. I couldn't be the problem. What? Because I just had such a victim mentality, and I couldn't figure out what needed to be fixed except for them. And so this is just something that me and my family have definitely prayed for years and years. And it was not until March of this year that God gave me a different perspective. I would always look at my brothers from a perspective of hurt instead of from a perspective of healing. And God showed me a different perspective. Instead of holding grudges, I started to feel gratitude. And I was like, huh? For what? Like, And it was really just because God showed me. He showed me that there were things that I was dealing with internally that was causing me to negatively contribute to the relationship that I had with my brothers. And I felt gratitude because I really wanted to thank them for bearing with me all these years while I was dealing with this unconscious hurt, and when I saw everything differently from a perspective of gratitude instead of grudges, and healing instead of hurt, I realized God was doing all these three things. He created distance between us to protect me from experiencing more hurt, which would have caused the process of healing to be even more harder for me personally. And with that protection, and through the distance, he was preparing me by changing my heart, by changing my mind, by changing my thought process, by shifting my perspective, and growing me as Corinne, as his child, in order to position me by putting the idea in my head to suggest to my mom that we all get together, which if you would have asked me a year ago, that would have been a terrifying thought at any time. And so he put it in my mind to have all of us get together. And I didn't really know why. And I realized that it was because he wanted me and my brothers to mend that relationship. So then when I went, I was like, okay, God, I'm sure you just want me to say something to them now or whatever the case is. And so I got there and I was with my mom and my brothers and I was waiting. And I was just like, so you ain't got nothing for me to say? No? Oh, okay. And then I realized that he was just positioning me to be exactly where I needed to be to visually see the blessing in the changes that he has made through each of us individually and how that has positively impacted the mending of our relationship. When we got together, it was nothing but positivity, laughs, and smiles. And when I tell you, that's not normal, okay? It was never normal for me, okay? The good times that we did have when I was younger were so drowned out by the negative times and the bad times and the negative treatment and emotions that I just really convinced myself that the good times didn't exist. So for God to really put me in this place with a different perspective, because he prepared me for it and he protected me and he positioned me, that allowed me to see that God really answered these prayers that everyone has been praying for 23 years. And I'm literally so thankful because now I can talk to my brothers without feeling bad. Now I can talk to my brothers without getting scared or just being fearful or what they might say or how it might affect me. I can just love my brothers, and it warms my heart, and I'm so thankful because I know that there's so much more to that. There's so much more of an impact than what I've realized so far, and I'm so excited to see more and more of that impact as time goes by, because God really does answer prayers, even if you've been praying those prayers for 22 years. So I really hope that can inspire some of you guys. And just keep waiting, okay? And ask God what he wants from you in that waiting, okay? Ask him what he's protecting you from. Ask him how he's preparing you, and ask him where he's positioning you. So, yeah. If you liked anything in this video, or if you have any comments or questions or suggestions about this video, feel free to comment. I love feedback, honestly. I feel like my videos have been getting longer and longer, so I don't apologize for that, because most of my videos are kind of offhand. I only prepare to a very small extent, but I truly just try to allow God to flow through me. So if you made it this far, thank you, and I will see you guys in the next video. Keep shining and keep smiling.
You can find the Pray While You Pray book and devotion book on Amazon, and also the Pray While You Pray devotions for singles on the YouVersion Bible app.